Last night's slate for MLB DFS was not ideal. I got pretty much every decision I possibly could have gotten wrong, outside of Ron Acuna Jr. And when you have a night like that, you're looking for a bounce back. And that's a good thing about MLB DFS, is it's not like football. We're waiting a full week to get another slate in. And so you're looking for that bounce back. And unfortunately, when I pull up the pitching pool for tonight's slate, it does not look like a bounce back kind of night. It looks scary, and I am frightened and ready to lose money for a second consecutive night. But we're going to power through. We're going to identify some pitchers we like for today's slate and get you set for Friday's slate or Thursday's slate, which looks a little dicey. We're going to break it down anyway. Welcome on into the Solo Shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sadas. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, here to get you set for Thursday's 5-game slate with lock set for 7:05 this evening. There is a pretty good early slate today, so if you, like me, are afraid and just bracing for the inevitable crash of the main slate, I'd play the early slate too, see how it goes, try to, hedge and see how things go there. But we do have the main slate here to break down. Lock at 7:05. The lucky thing for us is that there's no rain tonight. We did wind up getting that Baltimore-Seattle game rained out last night, but no real rain tonight. There is a lot of cold weather, though. There's only one game on this slate where the temperature is higher than 62 degrees. That is in Tampa Bay, where they're playing indoors. So we can keep most park factors relatively even because the split between them is like 10 or so degrees, but we should be higher on Tampa Bay due to the park being indoors. That's a good thing given the lower temperatures elsewhere. So bump up hitters in Tampa Bay, keep everyone else relatively even based on the weather for today. If you have questions about tonight's main slate, make sure you swing back today, 4 p.m. Eastern, for the Q&A show that is on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. No matter what your preferred platform is, you can get questions in. We'll take your questions live on air to get you set for the slate. Or if you just want to rib me for talking about Lance McCullers when he got rocked by Detroit last night, you can do that there as well, unfiltered, and yell at me there. So feel free to do so. That's today at 4 p.m. Eastern. We are doing that every weekday, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter. So make sure you swing on by and chat with us there. We also have a lot of stuff here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, not just baseball. We've got NBA, NHL. Austin Swaim is working on a UFC podcast for tomorrow. Should be up pretty early tomorrow morning. A NASCAR podcast coming at 10:30 tomorrow. No golf podcast next week. It's a non-traditional event. So Brandon will be talking about it in the 3:30 stream on Tuesday, but no podcast for PGA next week. But regardless, a lot of good stuff here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. So make sure you are subscribed. And if you like what you hear, make sure you leave us a rating and review as well. And thank you to those of you who have done so already. What's going on, sports fans? FanDuel Sportsbook has a special offer for you this spring. Same-game parlays allow viewers to bet on any NBA, MLB, or soccer game. Place a 4+ leg parlay on any game across those 3 sports, and if exactly one leg loses, you will receive a refund credit on the site up to $25. Come get involved in the action and place a same-game parlay on the FanDuel Sportsbook. Must be 21 plus and present in Colorado, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, or West Virginia. Refund issues a non-withdrawable site credit that expires in 7 days. Max refund $25. Terms apply. Gambling problem? In Colorado, call 1-800-522-4700. In Iowa, 1-800-BETS-OFF. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. For confidential help in Michigan, call 1-800-270-7117. In New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Virginia, call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Tennessee, call the Red Line at 1-800-889-9789. Or in West Virginia, visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Pitching preview for this Thursday main slate. Julio Urias is $9,600. He is the highest salaried pitcher on the slate by a wide margin. Patrick Corbin is second. He is 81. Big gap from Urias down to Corbin. Then we have Jordan Lyles, Rich Hill, and Tariq Skubal as the only other pitchers at $7,000 or higher. It's grim, that is for sure. So it's a rough pitching slate, and I don't think you can feel great about anybody on this list. And Urias we'll talk about in a second. But no one here to me is super, super safe. And once we consider all things, I'm going to wind up having Rich Hill at the top of my list? Question mark? Whatever. And most of that is driven by the matchup. And I hate recommending guys because almost exclusively their matchup, because it's a great way to make terrible decisions you regret almost immediately. but it is a difference-making matchup. The Rangers are a terrible offense in general, but they're especially bad versus lefties. They have an 81 WRC plus with a 28% strikeout rate. That is the highest strikeout rate on the slate by 2.5 percentage points. They also have the worst WRC plus by 9. They had the lowest walk rate. It's also a park that, although it is the best park for tonight, is not one that is extremely friendly for pitchers. So the surrounding context for Rich Hill is very good. We just have to decide if Hill is good enough to take advantage of those surroundings. And his first 2 starts this year have been positive. I know the ERA is bad at 7.20, but the peripherals are good. He has a 3.37 skill interactive ERA, a 28% strikeout rate, and a 5% walk rate. He's not letting up a ton of hard contact, and those 2 starts have come versus the Marlins and the Yankees. The Marlins, sneaky good against lefties. The Yankees are the Yankees. So the velocity also up a bit for Hill from where it was last year when he had a reduced strikeout rate. When you combine all that together, I think Hill is the best pitcher on this slate. Do I think he's a slam dunk, can't miss type guy? Absolutely not. No way. And I hope he's not treated as such by the public, because that'd be a big bummer. I do expect him to be pretty popular because the matchup is so good, but after you account for everything, I think that he is a guy who likely has the best ceiling and about whom I feel the best going into things. That feels very non-committal. I understand that, but that's about as far as I can go with anyone for tonight's slate. So Rich Hill, my number 1 pitcher for tonight's slate. Second for me will be Julio Urias, and I think he'll probably wind up being first for a lot of people, and I totally understand that. I'm just a bit lower due to the lack of strikeouts he has shown the past 2 years. Even with that, I still think he belongs in your player pool, just not as high as Hill and potentially not as high as where the public has him. The matchup here is a big plus for Urias as well. He's facing the Rockies, who have a 91 WRC plus against lefties with a 24% strikeout rate and a 7% walk rate. Those numbers are better than what they do versus righties, but it's still not great, and that's a plus for Urias. When he faced them in Colorado for his first start of the season, he had 6 strikeouts across 7 innings of 1-run ball. That was in Colorado. He was very good, and now he gets him in Los Angeles. The broader profile in Urias, though, is just a smidge underwhelming. He had a 20% strikeout rate last year. It's 18% this year, and that's not what you want for DFS, even on a shorter slate. The one positive for Urias is that he is getting whiffs, and whiffs can often lead to increased strikeout rates. He has a 12.1% swinging strike rate. Normally, the rule of thumb is you double that, you get the expected strikeout rate. He'd be closer to 24% based on that number. The problem is that he underperformed his expected number last year, too. He got more whiffs than you would expect based on his strikeout rate. So I don't want to just assume his strikeouts will spike because he's getting whiffs. There is enough here where I absolutely want to use Urias for tonight, but I'm guessing I'll wind up being a bit lower on him than consensus, which is fine. I'm not super concerned about that personally. I do still want exposure to him. Like, it's not a full fade situation. I'm not someone who feels the need to full fade guys. I'm lower on the public, but I think that if I wind up being underweight, that's fine. If I wind up overweight, that's also fine. I just think that he's a little bit lower than Hill for me, and I will treat him as such from an exposure perspective. The third slot is really tough. I was kind of hoping the Blue Jays might use Steven Matz on regular rest. They decided not to. They're going to throw him on Friday instead, so we're digging. I'm wary of Patrick Corbin. We'll discuss why and things to watch. The only other guy on this slate whose talent I like is Sean Manaea. He's facing the Tigers. They are very good against lefties, but even with that being the case, I do think that Manaea deserves to be third on our list. The matchup, very tough, a 127 WRC plus versus lefties for the Tigers, and they're playing really well this year. It's bit me a couple times with McCullers last night from a pitching perspective. That's been rough. It does help that Manaea himself has some good skills. He got off to a slow start last year from a velocity perspective. Things picked up, though, as the year went along, and those gains have carried over into 2021, and in fact, he's actually even up a tick from then, which is good. If we include the starts in the end of last year from where his velocity went up, he has a 4.15 skill interactive ERA for this specific slate. That's pretty good. He hasn't gotten many strikeouts this year. It's a 17% strikeout rate across 2 starts, but both those starts came versus Houston. And although Houston is not the juggernaut they once were, they still don't strike out. So it's not a big negative that Manaea has not bathed in strikeouts just yet. The matchup here is very risky. That's why I don't feel super confident in Manaea here, but the upside is there. And that draws me in, especially at just $6,700. So I would start things with Rich Hill, and I think that's where I'd go in cash games for sure because of the matchup and because of some things that Hill does as well. Urias deserves to be in our tournament pool, even if we wind up being underweight. And then Manaea can be the third pitcher that we use. I am not in on Corbin, but we'll talk about him later, and you can decide if you like him enough to use him. Try to give you the information you need to decide based on that in things to watch later on. Before that, though, let's talk some stacks. And if pitching is tough, stacks should inherently be easier, and that's pretty true for today. It all starts here with the A's. It's a bad park. As mentioned, it's in the 50s for today. It's not a great park, but I still think that they are in a good position. They're facing Tarik Skubal. Skubal struggled last year with a 5.63 ERA, and those struggles have gotten a bit worse this year. The big thing that Skubal was able to do last year was get strikeouts, and those aren't there early in 2021. He has an 8.0% swinging strike rate. His velocity is down a bit too, which is concerning. What makes things even worse is that both those starts came versus Cleveland. As you saw with Carlos Rodon last night, Cleveland not a very good offense, even against lefties. They're not a high strikeout team, but they're not a very good team. You'd expect better results for Skubal against a team with such little firepower. The A's are off to a slow start, but they can make some hard contact. They can put the ball in the air, and they can do some damage. Skubal did get a ton of strikeouts in the minors, like a lot. His strikeout rates down there were very, very good, and that likely means his long-term projection is solid. He should round into form eventually, but he's not there yet, though, and he's letting up an 11.5% barrel rate in the majors, so he needs those strikeouts pretty badly. Until we get confirmation that those strikeouts are coming, I'm going to be stacking against Skubal starting tonight with the Oakland A's. It does help the A's have some individual guys who can spank lefties. Mark Canha, Ramon Laureano, Matt Chapman had a home run a couple nights ago when I was wary of using him. Thankfully, I stumbled into him. It worked out well. Bad process, good results. We'll take it. Either way, they're good. Jed Lowry hitting for some power this year. I'll take that. But also keep an eye on Sean Murphy if he plays. I would love to use him. He did not catch Manaea last time, so it's very possible Murphy does sit. But if he's in there, I will be all about him at $2,200 for tonight. Very good hitter. And you don't get good hitters for $2,200 very often. So keep an eye on Murphy if he plays. Use him aggressively. You don't need the salary savings, but he's a good hitter. I think that's what we're looking for overall. By this point in the season, you're probably sick of hearing me talk about maximizing balls in play for stacking. So sorry about that. But it is essential. And that mindset puts me on the Nationals for tonight against Merrill Kelly. And Kelly is a bit in the Phil Hughes mold. If this is dating me a bit, I apologize. But Phil Hughes is a pitcher who should have actively considered walking more batters. It might actually get them better results. Like maybe they want to go more Justin Dunn. Like Justin Dunn might be a genius. I don't know. Maybe they should walk more guys. Part of that is because the batted ball profile against Kelly is underwhelming. He allowed an 11.1% barrel rate last year. It's 10.5% this year, and that number is too high. So the lower your walk rate, the more balls in play you're allowing, that's an issue, and people are tattooing your pitches so often. So he might actually want to walk more people. I know that probably sounds stupid. Merrill Kelly, if he's listening, I'm sure he is probably like, no, this guy's an idiot. But maybe consider it. The stuff for Kelly also just hasn't looked as great this year. His swinging strike rate is down to 8.2%. It was 9.7% last year, and that's despite making a start against the Rockies, who are #not good. The Nationals, roughly league average against righties, so they're better than the Rockies. Unless Kelly decides to take my genius advice and start walking more batters, he's probably going to be in a rough spot here. I say that tongue-in-cheek. He's smarter than me, so it's entirely joking, but maybe consider it. That makes the Nationals my second stack of the night, which means we're going right back to Kyle Schwarber at $3,300. He was on the COVID IL earlier, but he wasn't there very long, and if you look at what he's done so far since coming back, looked pretty good. A 40% hard hit rate, I think, across 10 balls in play. But feeling better about his the projection going forward based on that. Schwarber, a 44% hard hit rate and a 39% fly ball rate against righties since the start of last year, a 241 ISO. So I would start with Schwarber and build for there when you're stacking the Nats. And the good thing is that because Rich Hill is our favorite pitcher, he's $7,700. We can get to Juan Soto, we can get to Trey Turner without scrounging for salary elsewhere. So it's a good night to stack the Nats, given the salary we have to allocate for our hitters. The third stack for me is one that will likely make you groan. It makes my insides all upset, and I don't blame you. But I do think it's worthwhile to go to the Rays one more time tonight against Jordan Lyles. And I would stop stacking the Rays if I could. They have absolutely killed me the past week or so. And they have not been good despite good matchups. But they keep getting good matchups, and I keep trying to trust them in those good matchups. And unfortunately for us, the same is true once again tonight. They're facing Jordan Lyles, who is very much a low strikeout pitcher. He has been throwing his slider a bit more over his past 5 starts. I would assume that's trying to increase that strikeout rate. It hasn't worked. He has a 16% strikeout rate in that sample. He has still allowed a 7.1% barrel rate, which is a bit below the league average. Lyles has been okay in his first 2 starts this year. He did manage to keep the Padres largely in check across 4 1/3 innings. I just think the overall profile says we should stack against him, even if that means using a team that has been destructive to me specifically of late. So we're back on the Rays. As much as it hurts, just one time, guys. One time, don't murder me in the bankroll department. Lyles has relatively even platoon splits. So that means we can be into the righties on this team. So I'd still start with Austin Meadows and Brandon Lau, but it does mean we can bump up Randy Arozarena, Yandy Diaz, Manuel Margot if they wind up playing. All those guys are going to get a bump up because Lyles is not restrictive against righties. So start with the lefties in Meadows and Lau specifically, but then be okay with Arozarena, Diaz, and Margot as well. Let's finish up here with things to watch. One of the guys I alluded to in pitching but did not recommend was Patrick Corbin. I wanted to discuss why here to allow you to decide for yourself if you want to use Corbin, because I'm pretty concerned personally. It's not because he struggled in his first start. That was against the Dodgers. So you expect that to be rough. It's because he didn't look all that different from what he was doing last year. He did add a cutter, which is interesting, but his velocity was pretty similar to where it was at the end of last year on his fastballs. It was almost identical. And if we look at the past 6 starts, for Corbin, this is after his velo was similar to Manaea's, where it increases the year went along. So if we lop off the first part of the year where his velocity was really bad and look at just the back half plus the first start this year, it's a 19% strikeout rate with a 10.6% barrel rate. That's a tough combination. He did get some whiffs against the Dodgers, which is interesting. And this is a revenge game for Patrick Corbin against the Diamondbacks. But the Diamondbacks don't strike out a ton, so I think that I want to do here is sit out, see where he's at after this, and go from there. I'm just not quite convinced yet that he's past last year's struggles. So for right now, I'm okay taking a wait-and-see approach with Corbin. A stack I did not discuss is the Dodgers. I am okay with them, but they're not facing the kind of pitcher I am super fond of stacking against. That guy is Austin Gomber, and not only does he walk a lot of guys to limit the balls in play, but the balls in play against him are often weak. He has allowed a 3.1% barrel rate since the start of last year. That's helped him post a 2.11 ERA despite a 5.50 skill interactive ERA, and a lot of that came in relief. So you take the over on 2.11 for the ERA if you're offered that. But I am expecting his numbers to be better than what his peripherals say they should be, just because the number of balls in play is so low. The Dodgers are fine. I think that they're good to be 4th on your stacking list, but there's a good chance I wind up being lower on them than consensus just because Gomber is not the kind of pitcher I like to stack against due to the high walk rate, due to the low batted ball profile against, just an underwhelming profile for the most part. The lone game we have not discussed yet is Blue Jays Royals. So let's go briefly over both sides here to finish things up. The Blue Jays have not announced whom they're starting. That's generally a good thing for the opposing team because it means you're just facing middle relievers the entire game. Not necessarily elite because it's short bursts, et cetera, et cetera. So depending on who the Blue Jays elect to start, I think they can be 5th on our list. The Royals could be, that is. The Blue Jays are worth consideration for stacking too, facing Jacob Junis. Good results for him, but he's a low strikeout guy, not as limiting with his balls in play as Gomber. So I think both sides of this game are in play, depending on how the Jays play things at pitcher. It's not as much a priority as some of the other spots. So check an eye on that. We should know it's starting for them by the time we get to the 4 p.m. show today. So come back 4 p.m. YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter. Ask questions there once we do know the Blue Jays starter, and I'll talk about my thoughts on this game at that point. But that is all that we have for right now here on the Solo Shot. As mentioned, though, a lot of other stuff here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, in addition to NBA and NHL from Tom Vecchio, UFC and NASCAR tomorrow coming up. So make sure you are subscribed on your podcast platform of choice, and while you're there, make sure you leave us a rating and review. If you have questions for me, I am on Twitter at JimSannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you if you decide to play the early slate. If not, we'll talk to you once again this afternoon for the Q&A show. This has been the Solo Shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.